There are legends about bizarre American laws at the state level. The publication Business Insider has chosen one most idiotic in each of the 50 states. Alabama. Alabama residents are prohibited from purchasing, keeping, or training bears for the purpose of engaging in bear fights. Such exploitation of these animals is considered a Class B felony. In the United States, crimes or felonies are classified as Classes A, B, and C, with Class A considered the most serious, and is punishable by a fine and confiscation of the bear. Alaska. In this state, Americans are prohibited from getting drunk and staying indoors. Lawmakers fear that an intoxicated person might walk into a store or bar that sells alcohol and continue their drinking spree. In 2012, Alaska police began enforcing the law more tightly, sending officers into bars to arrest suspects. Arizona. Arizona law prohibits residents from feeding garbage to pigs without a permit, which must be renewed annually. However, Arizona has allowed the use of garbage cans instead of troughs to feed pigs, as long as the animal itself is intended for consumption. Arkansas. The state's laws do not allow paintball clubs to give out more than 25 free games to players who continue to win. However, some establishments are exempt from this law because their bonuses in the form of free games, toys, and gifts do not represent much value. California. In California, citizens will not be able to eat a frog that died during a frog contest, even if they wanted to. Every year, the city of Angel Camp hosts a competition to determine the winner of the highest jump. Colorado. In Colorado, you need to get a permit to change the weather. Artificial influence on weather conditions is not only possible, but also quite a profitable business. In some states, it is allowed to carry out artificial changes that affect atmospheric processes. For example, you can influence the weather by burning silver iodide, the vapors of which rise to the clouds and stimulate rain. Connecticut. If you decide to share your research papers, term papers, essays, or dissertations, be aware that you may be held accountable for doing so. According to Connecticut law, selling work in state educational institutions is not only prohibited, but is also a felony. The penalty for such a violation can be real prison time. Delaware. Delaware residents who own cats or dogs are prohibited by state law from donating or trading their pets' fur. Additionally, any products made from cat or dog fur could cost their owners a $2,500 fine and a 15-year ban on owning these pets. Florida. This state has perhaps one of the strangest bans on this list. Florida law prohibits alcohol retailers and liquor establishment owners from hosting or participating in dwarf tossing contests. The penalty for such entertainment is a fine of up to $1,000. The ban on this peculiar pastime, which originated in Australia, was introduced in the state in 1989. In 2011, one of the members of the Florida legislature tried to overturn it, but his attempts were unsuccessful. Georgia. The legislators of this state are so sensitive to llamas that they have introduced an absolutely absurd law. According to it, any person who has any connection with llamas, for example, riding these animals, training them, or who simply visited a fair with the participation of llamas, can be held liable for any bodily harm to these mammals. Even ordinary spectators of various performances with the participation of llamas can appear before the court. Meanwhile, specialists who have connection with these animals, in some cases, can be insured against liability for their death. Hawaii. Billboards have no place in paradise. According to Hawaiian law, billboards are only allowed in 18 designated locations across the state. The ban was introduced after the wives of state legislators launched an urban beautification initiative back in 1927. Idaho. In this state, the only one in the U.S., cannibalism is considered a crime and is punishable by up to 14 years in prison. However, the intentional consumption of human flesh and blood is permissible in situations where it is simply necessary for survival. Illinois. There is a popular myth that in Illinois it is a crime to possess salamanders with a combined street value of more than $600, that's about 75 individuals. In fact, it is illegal to possess various species of aquatic life worth more than that if the organisms were obtained illegally. Indiana. Indiana liquor stores are prohibited from selling chilled water and soda. But warm, please. Milk is also prohibited from being sold in liquor stores. State law clearly specifies what drinks must be stored behind the counter at what temperatures. New Mexico. This state law may be considered discriminatory by many New Mexicans. The state constitution states that morons may not vote in state elections. Obviously, the word moron means a mentally retarded person whose IQ is below 30. However, the word also has another, colloquial and offensive meaning. This can cause problems. New York. New York City's history directly influences the laws that are in effect there today. The state prohibits 3 or more masked individuals from gathering in the streets to participate in a demonstration or procession. This law has been in effect in New York since 1845, when local tenant farmers disguised themselves as Indians and killed the owners of the land they were farming. However, the law provides exceptions for masquerades or similar events. North Carolina. This state also has a law regarding bingo lottery. North Carolina has certain restrictions on this game. For example, in many areas, bingo games can last no longer than 5 hours. In addition, the state administrative code states that the lottery must be held no more than once every 2 days, and that the maximum prize for the lottery must not exceed $500. North Dakota. There is an organization in the state with the amusing name of the North Dakota Dry Pea and Lentil Council. According to state law, only U.S. citizens can be members of this organization. The council was created in 1997 for producers of dry peas, lentils, chickpeas, a legume, lupins, and green beans, and legislators clearly did not want people in the U.S. on green cards to be members. Ohio. Ohio has a law requiring every underground coal mine operator to provide its workers with an adequate supply of toilet paper. This law clearly makes sense, but its existence itself raises some questions about human decency. Oklahoma. The U.S. state of Oklahoma appears to still be steeped in the anti-communist sentiments of McCarthyism, which took place in the U.S. between the late 1940s and late 1950s. The state charter, updated in 2013, states, "There is a known international communist conspiracy to overthrow the government of the United States of America and several states, including Oklahoma, by violent means." Oregon. Oregon, like Ohio, has a law that is clear but thought-provoking. In this state, you are committing a misdemeanor if you leave a container of urine or feces by the road. It is also illegal to throw them out of a moving vehicle. The logic of the law is clear, but who has ever committed such a misdemeanor? Pennsylvania. In the laws of many countries, slave trade is a crime. However, the authorities of the state of Pennsylvania decided to make some clarifications to the law prohibiting human trafficking, and in this case, children. The state law prohibits the sale of children, but if you decide to exchange your children for various goods and services, then you will most likely be found guilty of committing a misdemeanor, not a crime. Therefore, you will receive a less severe punishment. Rhode Island. Residents of this state are strictly prohibited from biting off other people's limbs. If done deliberately, you can go to prison for 20 years. But if a person accidentally falls and bites off a part of someone's body, punishment can be avoided. South Carolina. The state's laws protect the honor of deceived girls and women. In South Carolina, young men and men over 16 are prohibited from seducing women by falsely promising to marry them. Such an offense is punishable by a fine and/or up to 1 year in prison. There are, however, many exceptions to this law. For example, if the seducer's victim was already married or had a reputation for being lewd or slutty, though these terms are not specifically defined in the law, the man may escape prosecution. There is no state law that punishes women who deceive men in the same way. South Dakota. South Dakota law allows agricultural producers to use fireworks to protect their sunflower crops. Since crows and other birds pose a threat to blooming fields, fireworks and other explosives are a great way for farmers to protect their crops. But fireworks cannot be used within 600 feet of homes, churches, and schools. Tennessee. Some Tennessee residents believe that white deer, or albino deer, have magical powers, like unicorns. Albino deer are extremely rare, with only 1 in 30,000 being born unlike any other deer. Tennessee law prohibits hunting animals with these features. It is also illegal to set traps to catch them or harm them. If you fail to comply with this law, the Wildlife Commission will charge you with a Class C misdemeanor, which carries a fine as punishment. Iowa. Iowa law requires margarine manufacturers to be completely honest with consumers. Margarine manufacturers who pass off their products as butter can be held liable. Kansas. The state can prohibit the sale of draft alcohol in public places, such as bars, if the establishment's percentage of revenue from food sales is less than 30%. Kansas was a dry state until 1948. Kentucky. In Kentucky, every member of the legislature, public servant, and licensed lawyer must swear on oath that he or she has never fought a duel with a deadly weapon in his or her life. This law, included in the state constitution in 1849, was intended to prevent duelists from being hired into public office. Louisiana. Lawmakers in this state are probably big fans of jambalaya. Under Louisiana law, jambalaya prepared the traditional way can be cooked for public consumption in a clay pot or over a fire, meaning the cook doesn't have to follow sanitary regulations. Maine. Residents of New England, Maine, apparently love playing bingo, a form of lotto, so much that they have a law that allows lottery attendants to help players fill out their cards while they go to the bathroom. However, the law does not apply to the high-stakes game. Maryland. In this state, the owner of a vending machine that sells condoms that do not contain latex is guilty of a misdemeanor and must pay a $1,000 fine. Massachusetts. Massachusetts legislators are so patriotic that they decided to pass a law prohibiting the arbitrary singing of the U.S. national anthem in stadiums. This is allowed only during certain parts of a sporting event, when the national anthem is sung by the entire stadium. Violation of this law is punishable by a fine of up to $100. In addition, a fine will have to be paid for dancing. In this case, any dance performed in the stadium is punishable. Michigan. Michigan authorities care about happy marriages of all residents of the state. That is why since 1931 there has been a law in effect, according to which adultery is considered a criminal offense. The punishment for cheating on the left is very serious, up to 4 years in prison and up to a $5,000 fine. In 2012, a Portage sheriff was fired for cheating on his wife by communicating via phone and email with a local waitress during work hours. The man's behavior was considered a misdemeanor by the court, so he was neither fined nor jailed. Minnesota. One would like to think that Minnesota officials were more concerned about animal cruelty than human stupidity when they passed this law. The state law prohibits games in which participants try to catch a pig that has been greased or smeared with something slippery. Turkey fighting is also illegal. Mississippi. This law may not seem so absurd compared to the others. In the state of Mississippi, using profanity in the presence of 2 or more people is punishable by up to 30 days in jail or a fine of up to $100. In the United States, the rule is perceived as an infringement on the First Amendment of the country's Constitution, which protects freedom of speech. Missouri. If you have a bull or a ram, you simply must know this law. According to it, if one of the above-mentioned animals, over the age of 1 year, is in heat for 3 days or more, then any person can castrate it, without incurring any liability for damage caused. Montana. One of the most absurd laws in this state also has to do with cloven-hoofed animals. In Montana, it is strictly forbidden to bring sheep onto railroad tracks with the intent of harming a moving train, the driver, or passengers, but not the animal itself. Such a violation carries a hefty fine of up to $50,000 or up to 5 years in prison. Nebraska. Nebraska law prohibits people with sexually transmitted diseases from marrying. This law is almost impossible to enforce. According to the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention in 2012, more than 8,000 residents of the state with chlamydia and gonorrhea risk never finding their family happiness by following this law. Nevada. In Nevada, the only state that does not arrest for prostitution, the use of X-rays to determine shoe size can be grounds for arrest. It is difficult to guess who might need this and for what purpose, but such a device does exist. It is called a pedoscope. New Hampshire. One of New Hampshire's strangest laws has been in effect since 1973. It is illegal to collect seaweed at night. Failure to comply with this law is a violation of the Fish and Game Act. The penalty for this is not specified. Seaweed is usually used as animal feed or fertilizer. It also contains a substance called alginate, which has gelling and thickening properties. New Jersey. Under this state's law, if you commit murder, manslaughter, armed robbery, or rape, wearing a bulletproof vest increases the severity of your crime, for example, from the 3rd degree to the 1st. Texas. With more and more human rights activists in the U.S. insisting on a complete separation of state and church, now, remember, the word God is printed on every dollar bill, the law of this state could easily be criticized and condemned. Texas law requires all people who want to run for any public office to recognize a supreme being. Otherwise, the candidate will have to pass a religious test. In other words, atheists cannot hold high-ranking positions. Utah. Utah law prohibits throwing missiles at a bus or bus terminal. Only elected or appointed peace officers or private security personnel can do so. Anyone outside of these categories will be charged with a 3rd-degree felony. Vermont. The state government has passed a law that lifts the ban on clotheslines. The question immediately arises, who banned clotheslines and why? The fact is that clotheslines, along with solar collectors, were recognized as energy devices operating on the basis of renewable resources. The same law states that no legal act can prohibit the use of solar collectors. Virginia. The laws of this state take care of the moral education of the population. In Virginia, only people who are officially married are allowed to have sex. At the same time, everyone else, regardless of the age and gender of the partner, is prohibited from doing so. Violation of the law is considered a 4th-class misdemeanor. Washington. Washington legislators, in order to avoid awkward situations before entering any building, came up with a law requiring the doors of almost all public buildings to open outward, that is, towards you. Any building owner who fails to comply with these rules is guilty of committing a misdemeanor. The state statute explains why such measures are actually needed, to avoid congestion during emergencies, such as fires. West Virginia. West Virginia law warns you, don't try to replace your hunting dog with a ferret. Under state regulations, anyone who hunts, catches, kills, or harms any bird or wild animal with a ferret faces a fine of $100 to $500 and 10 to 100 days in jail. It doesn't say why the state is so protective of these mammals. Wisconsin. Wisconsin is known as the dairy state in the United States and has a rule that all certified cheeses must be labeled as extremely delicious. Wyoming. Another U.S. state has come up with an absurd law aimed at protecting animals. In Wyoming, it is illegal to cut, tear or mutilate more than half of a sheep's ear. It is a felony and carries a prison sentence of up to 5 years.